today. Sorry. Okay, this is Dan Whitman, and it's our International Crisis Management team. It's now Veterans Day in the United States, November 11th. We know that World War I ended on the 11th minute of the 11th hour of the 11th month um, in the year when that terrible conflict ended. So we celebrate, we call it Veterans Day in the United States. Now, yes, I was going to show you, and just for a marker, this is an extra session. We're going to reenact the Suez Crisis of 1956. Let's look at the way the television news, you'll be shocked or taken aback by the style of the television news with martial military music in the background. This is the primitive days of television news. Let's have a look. Oh, are you getting the audio? No, okay, okay.
No.
Uh, yes, I have to do something. Share more. Uh, if this doesn't work, we'll just let it go. Share more. Um, share again. Sorry, let's just look at I know you can't get the audio. Sorry.
Telling you the latest incident to upset the chancelleries of the free world. President Nasser delivering his fiery speech telling of his nationalization of the Suez Canal, a seizure from private interests that the Egyptian says is his answer to the West for refusing to finance the Aswan Dam. It's a situation fraught with implications. But undeterred, President Nasser raises his country's flag to symbolize his action. And although his followers hail him and carry him triumphantly on their shoulders, in London, Paris, and Washington, the fate of the strategic waterway causes grave concern. A lifeline between the East and West, the free world does not want it dependent on the Egyptian government, which sends U.S. Undersecretary of State Murphy to London, where he is interviewed on the crisis by British pressmen.
Have you both any plan with you for action against Egypt? I can only say that we are going to engage in these conversations with our friends here and explore the matter. We haven't got to the point as yet of simply proposing.
What do you think of the idea of using force to protect Western projects in the Middle East?
Really, no comment on that at this stage.
Does your government now regret the decision not to help finance the Aswan Dam?
We have no regrets, no.
Arriving in the Egyptian capital from Alexandria, where he proclaimed his seizure of the Suez Canal Company, President Nasser finds Cairo's population in a veritable nationalistic frenzy. An acclaiming multitude which escorts him like a hero to the presidential palace, where he delivers another fiery speech in answer to opposition to his provocative action. Action which brings U.S. Secretary of State Dulles flying to London, where the English wait in the rain to see another momentous conference get underway at 10 Downing Street. It's a three-power meeting with France, the third party, and the talks tend to favor international rule for the canal, with a bid to Russia to take a part.
Okay, let me try one more. Share. No. Share. Okay, never mind. But you did you get the sense that the whole world, in terms of the media, the Western world had a sort of an exclusive use of the media. They did not have television in many of the countries involved in this crisis. And Oh, see. Let's see if this other video, let's see if you can get audio on this one. And here's a second. This is the outcome. Are you getting audio?
A smoking Port Said greets British expeditionary forces as they arrive for an assault landing. The city had been consistently bombed for days before the amphibious operation. Oil dumps go up in flames under the pounding, and the harbor is littered with sunken vessels, some bomb victims, others scuttled by the Egyptians. Egyptian airfields and key military points were occupied by British and French forces, but an uneasy stillness lay over the Suez Canal zone. A ceasefire was in effect, but the question of withdrawal led to stalemate, an Anglo-French refusal to pull out troops until the arrival of a United Nations police force. As the force, composed of Canadian, Colombian, and Scandinavian units, was being mustered, tension in the Mideast crisis continued, unabated. With the canal already blocked, the sole remaining aim of the Anglo-French forces was to begin clearing the key waterway, and in the area they held, back up Egyptian police in maintaining order and preventing looting. The invaders marked time while the diplomacy of the world through the United Nations General Assembly strove to reach a settlement to satisfy all sides and remove one of the gravest threats to peace in recent years. A wave of
And by the way, at the same time, the Soviet Union was intervening in the Hungarian uprising and sending tanks into the streets of Budapest. Happened to be at the same time. So it's hard to imagine how terribly critical and tense the whole world was in 1956.
outrage and protest sweeps across free Europe in the wake of Russia's bloody stamping out of Hungary's anti-Soviet revolt. In West Berlin, torches lit a mass meeting of thousands. In Paris, angry crowds attacked the stone fortress that houses the French Communist Party, setting fire to the massive structure during a 4-hour riot. Holland, after a nationwide moment of silence and sympathy for Hungary, crowds stormed Communist Party headquarters in Amsterdam. One of the most orderly cities in Europe saw angry fighting, a fiery demonstration that summed up the continent's reaction to the Red Army's sack of Budapest.
Okay, that just gives you a little bit of flavor of, number one, what people were focused on in the 1950s. Again, the television was kind of a monopoly of the United States and Western Europe. Maybe the Soviet Union had a national television, but the whole idea of creating a news feed was an innovation at this time. Also, notice how the whole world seemed to be America and Western Europe, or Western and Eastern Europe, as if other regions didn't even exist. Now, we know that the French were struggling in Southeast Asia. Vietnam actually got its independence at about this time, but that obviously didn't end the conflict in Vietnam. There were regional conflicts, but they were usually covered from the point of view of the metropole. So if something was happening in Algeria, what you would see on television would be from the point of view of the French. Likewise, Southeast Asia. I was 10 years old during the Suez crisis, so I do remember the sense of, as we have today, the world is in terrible trouble. There's a great crisis, and something terrible might happen. Khrushchev actually threatened to use nuclear weapons in support of Egypt's takeover, Egypt's nationalization of the canal. And then finally, just to set the context, World War II, British Empire finished, French Empire on its way out. And so that's also part of the context, that the behavior of the French and the British during the Suez crisis, which we now know, Eisenhower was furious at Britain and France because they went ahead with this the threat and the implementation of a military confrontation. Eisenhower was furious that he had not been consulted, and he kind of left Britain and France hanging by themselves. Britain and France assumed that the West would draw together because Egypt and the Soviet Union, these were the enemies of the Western countries. Let's say the Western members of the Security Council in the United Nations. That would be U.S., France, England, um, and this whole perception of something bad happening in the East. Who built the Suez Canal? The French in the second half of the 19th century, and they kept what 40% of the ownership, but they never understood. I think it's over. It's over. The French Empire, the British Empire, World War One put an end to the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, um, and others. The it was the war that really brought to an end the whole idea of empire. But the British and the French were still hanging on. They had, you can say what you will about, did they improve or did they disturb the natural state of the areas of the world that they took as colonies? But in their own minds, they were there to civilize those places with all the condescension in that word, especially the French. Um, and from an American point of view, they just didn't get it. It's over. It's over. We know that at the end of World War II, Roosevelt and Churchill, Roosevelt was very insistent to Churchill, your empire is finished. And Roosevelt and Churchill worked very well together. They were very friendly. They successfully created this alliance that defeated Nazi Germany. Um, but Churchill was very grumpy when Roosevelt would tell him, "I hope you understand. You don't have an empire anymore. It's gone. Get rid of and so 1956 was kind of a slow awakening of Britain and France. They no longer ruled the world. And this will happen to every country. The United States of today, the Russian Federation, maybe China, all countries that perceive themselves to be running everything, sooner or later, it will stop. That's um, my little sermon on this. It's just a scene setter. It was really a huge crisis. Sometimes we look back, it seems so far in the past, and um, it didn't seem like much. At the time, it was really very critical. And again, I've mentioned Khrushchev during the crisis said, if you oppose Egypt, Egypt was nationalizing the canal. This was going to paralyze the users of the canal. That would be France and England drawing petroleum out of the Middle East. The United States less so. But he said, Nasser is a great national hero. If you stand in his way, I will start a nuclear war. We easily forget this, but it was terribly tense. And I remember from the American, 10 years old, not old enough to have any judgment about this, but from the newsreels, I remember Nasser seemed like the devil. He seemed like a monster. Uh, and it was kind of frightening that to Americans and British and French that Nasser was so extremely popular, not only in Egypt, but in the Arab world. The West was living in a hangover. It just didn't really understand what was really going on. Now, let's start. Let's go in the order. Um, in fact, this whole crisis, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, you could say that Nasser created the crisis by deciding he would take the 65% of his ownership in the canal and he would take it no longer as private property, but nationalize it and make it an Egyptian resource with the enormous support of his own people. So when we start in a moment, let's start with Egypt. That would be Angelina and Khatun. And Angelina has a question or a comment. Yes?
No, I would like to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will be the first delegate. So
Oh, fine. Okay. Now, so let's do a fictional thing here. Da da da. Here's smoke, and we're going to go from what we just did. We are now in a let's say we're in Geneva, Switzerland. I am Dan Whitman, and I am here representing Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General of the United Nations. We have a crisis here. Could we turn to the Egyptian delegation, to Delegate Timchuk, to explain the Egyptian point of view, and then we'll turn to the other delegate, Khaltun Warsame. Delegate Timchuk, your comments.
yeah, shall I begin?
Please do.
Okay. Distinguished delegates, honorable representatives of the international community, today I stand before you not merely as a delegate of Egypt, but as the voice of a proud and sovereign people who have struggled for centuries to reclaim their dignity, their land, and their future. For too long, Egypt was a playground for imperial ambition. From Ottoman rule to the British occupation, our nation's livelihood was drained by those who spoke of progress but brought only domination. The Suez Canal, dug by the hands of 120,000 Egyptians, many of whom perished in its creation, has been used not for Egypt's prosperity, but for foreign profit and control. Let it be clear, the Suez Canal is Egyptian territory. It was built on Egyptian soil by Egyptian labor and with Egyptian sacrifice. Yet, for 100 years, it became a state within a state, an instrument of exploitation enriching others while Egypt received but a fraction of its rightful share. When my president, Jamal Abdel Nasser, announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company, it was not an act of aggression, it was an act of justice. We did not seize what belonged to others, we reclaimed what was always ours. The revenues from the canal will now serve the Egyptian people. To build the Aswan High Dam, to control the life-giving Nile, to raise the living standards of our citizens, and to secure the independence for which generations have fought. Egypt has pledged, and I repeat here today, that navigation through the Suez Canal shall remain free and open to all nations in accordance with the 1888 Convention of Constantinople. We have never denied and will never deny the world's right to passage. Our quarrel is not with nations, but with imperialism. Yet, in response to our lawful exercise of sovereignty, we are met with threats, conspiracies, and the drums of war. Britain and France, the very nations that once declared Egypt's independence, now seek to deny it. They convene conferences without Egypt's participation. They propose international users association and speak openly of force. To them, we will say, Egypt will not bow. We're a peace-loving nation, but we will defend our rights to the last drop of our blood. We have no intention of aligning ourselves with either power bloc. We seek friendship with all nations. The United States, the Soviet Union, and every state that respects our independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate of Egypt. At this point during our first round, there may be questions of clarification. It's not yet time to have an argument over this issue, but are there any questions that any delegate might have of Delegate Chemchuk of Egypt? And while you're considering that, let's turn to Delegate Warsame, who can add to that argument, to that presentation. Khaltun Warsame, can you unmute?
Thank you so much. I'll present my point. Distinguished chairs, honorable delegates, allow me to reaffirm the principles that guide the Arab Republic of Egypt in the critical moment. The Suez Canal is not merely a waterway, it is a lifeline of global commerce, a symbol of human endeavor, and above all, an integral part of Egypt's sovereign territory. Egypt's decision to nationalize the Suez Canal Company was not born out of hostility, but of necessity, to a peaceful and lawful measure taken to secure our nation's economic independence and dignity. The world must understand that Egypt seeks not confrontation, but cooperation built on respect and equality among nations. We remain fully committed to the Convention of the Constantinople, which guarantees freedom of navigation through the canal for all vessels, regardless of nationality, in times of both peace and war. Our government has repeatedly assured the international community that Egypt will uphold this commitment faithfully. What we reject, however, are attempts to disguise intervention or control under the pretext of international management. True international cooperation cannot exist where one nation's sovereignty is denied. The canal will continue to serve all nations, but under Egyptian administration in accordance with the international law and justice. We invite all peace-loving nations to view this not as a crisis, but as an opportunity to affirm the principles of self-determination, mutual respect, and the right of every nation to govern its own affairs, free from coercion. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Khaltoon Warsame. I believe we do not have a delegation from the United Kingdom. Delegate Yusuf, are you on the call? Apparently not. So the principal opponent of this argument is not present in the room. The French have an expression, les absents ont toujours tort. Those who are absent will always be in the wrong. But as a representative of the Secretary General, I'm not going to make that judgment, nor am I going to make the arguments for the United Kingdom on their behalf. If they decided not to be here, perhaps this is not an issue of great importance. Let's turn to the other Western European country that has similar interests in the canal and which oversaw the construction of the canal in the late 19th century. Delegate Musuho, do you have comments to make for the French position?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, honorable chair, and esteemed diplomats. My name is Nicole Musuho, and I have the honor of representing the French Republic at this event of International Crisis Summit on the nationalization of the Suez Canal. We gather here today at a critical moment as urgent questions have been raised regarding international trade, regional stability, and compliance with historic agreements since the recent nationalization of the Suez Canal by the Egyptian government. France approaches this summit not only as a country with long-standing historical links to the Suez Canal, but also as a champion for international relations and responsible utilization of shared global resources. France has a long and historic connection to the Suez Canal, looking back in 1869 when our very own engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps designed and led its construction. The Suez Canal Company was formed to pay for the canal's construction, with France owning 56% of the shares and Egypt 44%. The canal is vital for international trade, and France played a pivotal role in its design, funding, and construction. We remain deeply committed to its effective management and accessibility. Today, that history has been undermined. The nationalization of the Suez Canal by the Egyptian state under President Gamal Abdel Nasser poses a threat to the French economy and to the region's rich history. To make my remarks clear, this is a matter of regional stability, international agreements, and France's international stature. France has endured significant setbacks over the years, such as a loss of its colonial presence in Vietnam and the continuing struggle to manage its role in Algeria. We are now concerned about the actions of President Nasser, which not only jeopardizes our access to the Suez Canal, but also supports movements in Algeria that threaten regional stability. As a nation, France is not seeking war, but we cannot remain indifferent when our legitimate interests and international agreements are threatened. Consequently, France has coordinated with Britain and Israel to secure continued access to the Suez Canal and to address concerns regarding President Gamal Abdel Nasser's support for groups challenging the French authority in Algeria. France views the Suez Canal crisis of 1956 as a direct challenge to its national power and influence in the world. The nationalization of the Suez Canal by the Egyptian president threatens our political standing in the Middle East and North Africa. As a result, our main objectives are to defend our national heritage, ensure continued access to the Suez Canal for French vessels, support coordinated action with Britain and Israel to help restore international control over the Suez Canal, and to maintain Western unity despite differences in approach. In conclusion, distinguished delegates and diplomats, France reiterates its unwavering commitment to international collaboration, adherence of legal agreements, and safeguarding international trade routes that are important to all nations. The Suez Canal stands not only as a channel of commerce, it represents a remarkable human achievement, serving as a connection between continents that must remain accessible, secure, and stable. France therefore urges all nations present here today to honor the principles of mutual respect and peaceful dialogue, and not to undermine trust that holds our international relations. Our aim is not conflict. We would like to have fairness, and France is ready to work with all partners, including the United Nations. Therefore, let us work together to ensure the Suez Canal is governed in a manner that symbolizes cooperation, not conflict, for the benefit of all nations. I want to sincerely thank you for your attention to this important matter. Thank you once again.
Delegate Massoud, thank you for that very clear articulation of the French point of view. I point out to the other delegations, the delegation from France makes a parallel double point, and a future a meeting in this session, we might question. France makes relies on its own national pride, its own national heritage, in making its position clear. But it also talks about regional cooperation and cooperation as opposed to conflict. I'm not sure that I quite see how these two principles can work together when it does appear that the one perhaps does not match with the other. We can look into that in our future discussions, but thank you very much, Delegate Masuho. Let's, in order to keep this a balanced discussion, let's turn next to Israel, since the three countries that seem to have aligned positions in this crisis are UK, France, and Israel. Delegate Wambwa, representing Israel, would you have an opening remark?
Sure. Distinguished honorable delegates and diplomats, today Israel comes to the table in the spirit of peace and lawful coexistence. The recent nationalization of the Suez Canal and the continued blockage of the Strait of Tehran has gravely affected not only our Israel's lifeline to the Red Sea, but also the principle of free and secure navigation upon which international commerce depends. Our ships are barred from the canal. Our southern ports of Eilat stand isolated, and alarming arms inflow into Egypt from the Soviet Union threaten the balance of security in our region. Israel's goal is simple and legitimate: the restoration and lasting guarantee of freedom of navigation for all the nations, and the assurance that no state sovereignty shall be used to endanger another's coexistence. Israel seeks cooperation and not confrontation, anchored in international law, collective security, and respect for every nation's right to trade and to live in peace. We prepare to work with all present, including the great powers, to establish effective international arrangements that ensure safe passage, regional stability, and a future in which the Near East becomes a bridge of commerce rather than a threat and a source of conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wamba. I note that all delegations have referred to this concept of free navigation. We did hear from the Egyptian delegation that they had no intention of impeding free navigation, but when the delegations of France and Israel raised this point, it implies that they don't trust Egypt to abide by what it says it will do, which is to continue offering free access to the canal. Again, we can take up that issue later. Every delegation so far has referred to the importance of free navigation in the canal. Two delegations have raised it as an existential point where Egypt claims that it would never stand in the way of free access. We'll talk about that later. Now, we'll leave the United States for last and turn now to the delegation of the Soviet Union with Delegate Hladka. If Delegate Hladka would like to explain the Soviet position.
Yes, thank you. So, distinguished delegates, the Soviet Union warmly greets all participants and expresses its deep concern over the crisis unfolding around the Suez Canal. My name is Daria Hladka, and I'm representing the Soviet Union in these negotiations. So the nationalization of the canal by President Nasser is a legitimate act of Egypt's sovereignty, and we fully support his decision. Any use of force by foreign powers threatens not only the stability of the region, but peace across the world. We must also point out that the position of some governments on this issue is deeply contradictory. On one hand, they recognize Egypt's sovereign rights. On the other, they question Egypt's ability to exercise those rights, using it to justify interference in Egypt's internal affairs. Claims that so-called international interests limit Egypt's right to nationalize the canal serve only to maintain Egypt in inferior position, unfairly linking nationalization with navigation. It is important to remember that the Suez Canal Company, founded on a century-old concession, has always had a colonial character. Across Asia, Near and Middle East, nations are awakening to their rightful independence, and the principles of the United Nations require that we respect and support their sovereignty. Arab countries are right to point out that plans for international control of the canal risk creating a new colonial stronghold. The military preparations in Britain and France are well known to us, showing their willingness to impose their will if Egypt does not comply voluntarily. Military preparations are unacceptable and must be stopped immediately. The Soviet Union fully supports President Nasser's efforts to strengthen Egypt's independence, including major projects like Aswan High Dam. We oppose the use of force and call for all disputes to be solved through dialogue, international law, and the United Nations. The Soviet Union is committed to playing a responsible and active role in protecting the rights of sovereign nations, supporting Egypt, and ensuring that no foreign power undermines justice or peace in the Middle East.
Thank you, Delegate Hladka. The Soviet position is very clear. It supports sovereignty of countries previously subjected to colonialization, and it stands in favor of nationalizing the canal. Let me break the pattern for just a moment. The topic of the Aswan Dam has been raised 2 or 3 times. If the delegation of Egypt would like to comment at this time, what is the importance of the Aswan Dam now under construction? Who's paying for it, and why is Egypt so interested in having it? I invite you to comment on that now, or if you'd rather do that later, we can do that. The Aswan Dam is a key component of this conflict. Would Delegate Timchuk or Khaltoon have any comment on the Aswan Dam? If not, we'll turn to the United States. We know that the United States oh, yes, Delegate Simchuk does wish to comment on the Aswan Dam, I think. Can you unmute?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
So the Aswan Dam has served as a crucial source for our soil so that our citizens can live prosperously and have enough water and food. But the funding of that will not be the funding was not that we were given, that we were said, that we were promised to, because the amount of the funding that the US promised us did not correspond with what we have now, because we got only from 100 million dollars, we got only seven, around 10. That is why we would like to have our revenues back. That is why we have nationalized the Suez Canal, to have enough funding for the Aswan Dam.
Okay, then let's see. I pose this question not on behalf of France and UK, but if you say you're looking to get revenue for the construction of the dam, does this imply that you will impose greater cost on the ships traversing the Suez Canal? What is the linkage there?
Um, for now, we don't have the fixed fees for the vessels coming through the canal. But yes, if we have nationalized the canal, we can negotiate the fixed fees.
Okay, earlier I'm not questioning what you're saying. Earlier, your delegation said absolute free access to the Suez Canal. It's possible that now you're considering putting conditions on that position. We'll get into that later. And we note the importance of the Aswan Dam. For millennia, Egypt depended on the overflowing of the Nile River during seasonal flooding, which enabled agriculture to be conducted, even to be created in the part of Egypt that borders on the river, the rest of the country being mainly desert. The Aswan Canal would regularize the water supply and make it more possible to have a longer growing season. I think we all understand that. And we do understand the benefits to Egypt of the Aswan Dam. Question is, who would pay for it and what would be the conditions? So we now turn to Delegate Darmi of the United States. We know that the United States instinctively does not like it when countries nationalize private entities. The United States has a clear pattern of opposing that type of action. Delegate Darmi, would you like to explain to us the U.S. position?
Mr. Chair, the United States has listened carefully to the statements made in this assembly. We recognize the concerns raised by all sides, the security of Israel, the rights of navigation, and the sovereignty of Egypt. But no concern, however serious, can justify the method by which force has been reintroduced into the region. To our allies who have acted militarily, we say this with candor and friendship. Our bonds are strong, but friendships does not require silence in the face of error. The United States cannot condone armed intervention launched without collective authorization. The Charter cannot be treated as optional. It is the foundation of the world order. The Soviet Union, we say this, peace is not secured by threats or by turning this crisis into another theater of Cold War competition. The people of the Middle East are not pawns in any ideological context. Therefore, the United States calls for the following: an immediate ceasefire under UN supervision, withdrawal of all armed forces behind their own frontiers, and the deployment of a United Nations emergency force to ensure the free movement of international shipping. Let us not delay the measure of our commitment to peace. We will not be judged by words, but the courage to act lawfully, swiftly, and together. The United States chooses peace, but peace through law, not conquest. Thank you.
The delegation of the United States takes our breath away. It makes arguments that the United States we would not expect of the United States. This is indeed a very unique situation. The United States calls for the withdrawal of military forces. That would be in opposition to the actions of France and the United Kingdom. Does this, I would ask the delegates of France and Israel for a response to that. This is a most surprising position. And it does compromise the strength of the French and Israeli position. Any comments? Let's see if the delegates of France and Israel might have a response to that. Are you surprised that the United States would be asking for the withdrawal of a national military force of France and England? Any comment on that?
Good evening, Dr. Whitman.
Yes, Delegate
And
Masoul.
fellow delegates.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to make a point on that. Okay, for us, France, we are willing to take no military action and to withdraw the military that is already there, provided we agree on ensuring equal access to the Suez Canal.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that is our position.
That's a pretty clear position from France. Egypt has stated that there will be no obstacle to free access to the Suez Canal. Is the French delegation saying you don't trust Egypt when they make that claim? Egypt says there will be free access to the canal from anybody who wants to use it. You are saying you would withdraw French forces on the condition that the canal give free passage. What's going on here? Do you not trust the Egyptians when they say they will give access to any commercial ship that wants to traverse the canal?
We don't trust them because
You don't trust them. Oh,
because of President Nasser's actions. He's currently, he actually nationalized the Suez Canal and also supporting the rebel groups that oppose France authority in Algeria.
The Colonel Nasser, as we know, imagines himself to be more than the president of Egypt and to have a leadership role in the Arab world, even extending to the western edges of the Arab world in the Maghreb, in Algeria. Does Egypt want to respond to that? Indeed, does your head of state have ambitions that he's not quite articulating? And is he intending to assert a greater power outside the borders of his country? Any response from Egypt on that? Is that accurate? That the claim that Nasser, in fact, number one, cannot be trusted, and number two, is siding with rebel forces that are working against the French and who are killing French citizens. Any response to that? And you can think it over. Let's go. Let me see if I can summarize what we've heard here. All delegations are in favor of free access to the canal. All delegations, except Egypt, believe that Egypt is not telling the truth when they say everyone will have access. The Israeli and French positions are based largely on national pride and on the insistence that the world recognize their rightful place as former colonial nations. And we haven't mentioned yet, but that their imports of petroleum are very, very dependent on absolutely free access to the Suez Canal, less so the United States, which has other sources. But so we seem to have three entities here. We have UK, absent in today's discussions, France and Israel, approaching this crisis, claiming a wish to have a peaceful outcome, and yet willing to commit military forces to prevent the nationalization of the canal. Egypt makes the point of national sovereignty, and with an implication that France, England, and Israel are standing in the way of the national pride and sovereignty of the Egyptian nation. The Soviet Union allies itself with the notion of the liberation of formerly colonized states, and the United States claims that it would, well, it says it makes 3 points: ceasefire, withdrawal of forces, those would be French and British forces, with Israel standing in the background, and the creation of a UN force, thus giving a peaceful outcome. Can all delegations look at the following question? What are the motives of the Soviet Union in siding with Egypt in this crisis? Why is the Soviet Union doing that? We turn to Delegate Hladka or to any other delegate. What is behind this alliance, this friendship, which is very much on the surface, very evident to everybody, a very close relationship between Egypt and the Soviet Union? What is this all about? Is it really about national interest? Is it about world domination? Is it about opposing Western countries? What is the essence of this friendship? Delegate Hladka may have something to mention about that, or anybody else in this discussion. The Soviet Union rises to the defense of Egypt. Yes, Delegate Hladka. Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that our main goal is that we want to prevent war in that region and ensure that Egypt will remain a sovereign country with its own right to choose what is happening on their territory and how to navigate that. And we also support, that international law, and Egypt's sovereignty is our main priority. And of course, looking at what actions of Great Britain and France, they could lead to massive, horrible consequences, such as military losses and human, of course, and we do not want that to happen, and for that interference.
Thanks for that clarification. Other delegations may have ideas about what the Soviet Union is actually doing, but not saying. The Soviet Union says we want to prevent war, and yet the argument could be made that that if there's a conflict, it was initiated by Egypt's action in nationalizing the canal. It's true. The military forces in the area come from the outside, and yet there was provocation on the part of Colonel Nasser to provoke the Western powers to put in military equities. You support Egyptian sovereignty. Again, I see 2 points being made: prevent war, support Egyptian sovereignty. It could be said by some that the creation of a conflict came initially from Egypt in nationalizing the canal. I'm not here to make that argument, but I do see a logical question. Does this really follow logically? Prevent war, but support Egyptian sovereignty? Yes, Delegate Wambwa of Israel.
Yes.
Can you unmute? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, distinguished delegates and Mr. Chair, the delegation of Israel recognizes and respects the comments of the Soviet Union committing to observe and maintain peace at the region. However, there are credible sources that there has been a supply of ammunition from Soviet Union. And again, the world knows, and I hope the world can see that recently Egypt offered to partner with the Great Britain and France to construct the Aswan High Dam. However, due to the violated treaty that had been established before, whereby France and the UK were to have shares, the two countries denied to continue in any future partnership. As so, all of us can see that this is a way of punishing France and UK because they did not accept the offer to support the construction of the dam. So as much as the Soviet Union commits to observe peace, we can see and we can sense that such are motives whereby it is aimed at punishing France and UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wamba. You talk about violating a treaty. You're referring to the Constantinople Accord of 1888, I guess. Would other delegations agree that nationalizing the canal is a violation of the Treaty of Constantinople, 1888? Would this be, at that time in the late 19th century, perhaps even the notion of nationalizing a private company did not even exist. May we say that the nationalizing of the canal is a violation of that treaty? Any comments from anybody on that? I'm just trying to get a full picture since I have to report back to Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, whose interest is purely maintaining peace. Let me open the floor to any delegation who has anything to add. Let me see if I can summarize. Everybody wants a peaceful solution. Everybody voices support for national sovereignty, but at the same time, the former colonial countries, UK and France, do refer to their own national sovereignty and their own national pride. I don't know if this comes into conflict with the new international order, which favors sovereignty for countries that are recognized as countries. The United States has not said, but it has implied resistance to France and the United Kingdom. Let me turn back for a moment to Delegate Darmi, who may have something to add. The United States is a traditional close ally throughout World War II and beyond to UK and France. Are you saying, the delegation of the United States, are you saying that you're ready to break with your traditional partners and to have them remove their military forces? This is quite provocative to your former friends. Are you no longer friendly with France and the United Kingdom? Delegate Darmi?
No. To our allies, we say this with candor and friendship. Our bonds are strong. But our friendship does not require the United States to be silent in the face of error. So the United States cannot condone armed intervention, whether from friend or foe, without collective authorization. The Charter cannot be treated as optional. This is what we need to do for the foundation of the world order and in order for peace in the world to be maintained.
This is a remarkable statement, everybody. The United States has just said that it values its friendships with its traditional allies, but not at the cost of breaking international norms as established by the United Nations. This is a stunning statement and implies that the U.S. is not going to support France or the United Kingdom in this crisis. The Soviet Union, does this make you happy, Delegate Klatka?
Well, it's hard to say during these times in our relation between Soviet Union and United States of America. It's this particular conflict also could be a risk of escalation in this situation, but we support your willingness to stop any military or power interference into Egypt's territory, and we support further negotiations at that point.
Another stunning statement that leaves us breathless. The Soviet Union has just said something in support of the United States. Is this not dramatic and unexpected? Do other delegations, Israel, do you feel abandoned? Do you feel as if the Soviet Union and the United States are turning against you, Delegate Wambwa? Does this create that impression? We're so stunned, we're so breathless by these dramatic statements from the USSR and US that we are speechless. um, let's try to conclude. We don't have too much more time. Where do we stand? Does any delegate see ideas of concordance in what we've just heard? Everybody says that they want to avoid a conflict. Everybody says that. That said, who is creating the conflict? Who are the drivers of this crisis? It's not Indonesia, it's not Cuba, it's not Canada. Why do we have at this negotiation France, UK, Egypt, Israel, US, USSR? Who is causing the problem? Any comment from?
Hello?
Yes. Yes, Delegate Musso.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Whitman. I have a possible negotiation offer to make before I answer your question. Okay, for us, France as a nation, we are willing to provide financial support for the Aswan High Dam project because the Egyptian government said they nationalized the Suez Canal to get funds to support the Aswan High Dam project. So therefore, we could provide financial and technological support to the Aswan High Dam project. I believe this will demonstrate a spirit of partnership rather than conflict. And then it's also likely to strengthen our diplomatic ties with Nasser's government. That is my point. And then to go back to your question, I believe Egypt is driving conflict because France is allowed to manage 56% of the total assets, while Egypt is allowed to manage 44%. This clearly shows that we have a higher percentage, but the Egyptian government is going ahead to nationalize this private project. Thank you. That's my point.
Again, we have dramatic statements from everybody. France is willing to pay money to its enemy, Egypt, to build the Aswan Dam. This would be a quid pro quo, perhaps, Delegate Musso. You would, in exchange for helping finance the Aswan Dam to your enemy, what would you be asking for in exchange? You don't just give money because you're nice people, I think. You want something in return. What would that be?
Okay, what we are trying to prevent as a nation is nationalization of the Suez Canal. We want French vessels to have free access of the canal. So
Egypt
the main
has-
point here is to
Yep, go ahead.
and the main point here is to prevent the nationalization of the canal.
Egypt has said at the very beginning, yes, it's nationalizing the canal, but no, it will not prevent access to navigation. I see 3 comments, perhaps on that issue. Let's see, in the order, yes, Delegate Flatka?
Yes, thank you, Nicole, the representative of France, for such unexpected solution. But the question that I have is, one of the reasons why this crisis started is that Egypt's previous allies, they rejected the idea of helping with this dam, and this also led to this crisis. And also Egypt wanted to get rid of its colonial history connected with influence of France and Britain. So this is my question, and also I would like to add solution from our side. We are ready to help Egypt fund the dam and ensure the economy in this region are stabilized. And for France and Britain, the risk could be we could create a special fee tax regulations that could leave both sides satisfied with that. So the influence will remain with Egypt, but France and Britain will also be on like special positions in this.
Egypt, you're very clever. You've gotten France to offer money. You've gotten the Soviet Union to offer money. You're very persuasive, Egypt. We turn to Delegate Khaltoun of Egypt. Are you? You've accomplished an amazing thing here. You've got the Soviet Union wanting to help you build a dam, and France. Pretty good, right, Delegate Khaltoun, Warsaw?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And my point is, while France has an economic and political interest in our region, Egypt's nationalization of the Suez Canal should be a lawful exercise of sovereignty over its own territory and resources. Any concerns regarding foreign investments do not justify military intervention against our country acting within its rights or other accusations. We did agree, and we did say that
But
we did agree.
you did agree that everyone would have access at the canal, I think.
Yes, and hindered trade is in all our interest, but sovereignty is not a privilege to be negotiated. It is the foundation upon which true partnership must rest. Egypt seeks peace and cooperation, not permission and accusations from other countries.
Okay. Interesting that we have every country, actually only USSR and the US have not mentioned the importance of sovereignty. France cares about sovereignty. Egypt cares about, well, every delegation cares, but the points have been made more with greater emphasis by Egypt and France. Let's go to a final comment before we try to summarize. Let's go to Delegate Wambua.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Israel's concern is not the dispute. Like I want to say that Israel's concern is not dispute ownership, but to safeguard the universal right of free navigation. We therefore call for impartial verification to ensure that this great international waterway remains generally open to all, because as we speak, we cannot access the waterway, and unfair enough, we are the only ones, we Israel, who cannot access the waterway. I will say that French is better off, the UK is better off, and other nations are better off because as at now, they can access the waterway. Why only us, the Israelites, who are barred from accessing the waterway? Otherwise, we could also commit to assist technologically, even financially, to the construction of the Aswan Eye Dam, provided we are allowed to access the waterway and not segregated, while others are even given an offer to pay as they use the waterway. Thank you.
A very logical comment. If all countries represented here are in favor of free access, why does Israel alone not have that same privilege? We are at time, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Secretary General Doc Hammarskjöld, I want to congratulate everybody here for making the greatest effort, number one, at finding ways to prevent a conflict. Number two, at stating your legitimate interests as sovereign nations. USSR, US did not make this point because because it's obvious as superpowers, everybody understands those two nations have sovereignty. All of the other delegations believe that their sovereignty is in question and has to be affirmed. So let me thank you for this outcome. I will report to the Secretary General that that at least one delegation has suggested the deployment of blue helmets, UN peacekeepers. We don't know if the UN will be capable or willing to do that, but we look to the blue helmets and the United Nations as a possible remedy. What we want above all at the UN is to avoid conflict. That is our highest goal. So thanks. And with that, we'll conclude this part of the negotiation. Now, I take my jacket off and let's talk. Let's do a very quick after action report. What did we observe? By the way, every person today was brilliant. I have to say that. Your comments, you were in role. You very ably articulated the interest of the country you were assigned to. In some cases, I believe that personally, you probably disagree with some of the points you were making because you were at random. You were assigned to different countries, especially to Kelvin Wambua, representing a country that at this time is not seen in a good light by most of the world, Israel, but who makes perfectly logical points. Why should Israel be the only country not to have access? Anybody's comment? Did we go forward or backward in this conversation? And what were some of the surprises? What was surprising? And by the way, the comments you made were absolutely in accord with the historic unfolding of this crisis. In fact, these things did happen, as you have articulated. What were the surprises that came up? Anybody? I will say, to me, even within this exercise and also looking back at the actual history of this, amazing. The Soviet Union and the United States voted together in the United Nations. Isn't that amazing? Um, uh, Daria, your comment on that?
As a representative from the Soviet Union, it was really hard to not threaten all the countries that we have nuclear power. And
Yeah.
if we don't like something, we will just use it, and we don't care about other aspects. And I
Right.
think this tendency, unfortunately, remains still these days. But
I know.
still, yeah, overall, if countries back at that time use more soft power or something like that, maybe those
Yeah.
conflicts would be resolved differently. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Daria, I give you triple credit. A Ukrainian representing the point of view of the Soviet Union. That you did that really, really well, and it could not have been easy. You're. By the way, everybody had prepared comments. Wow! And I've read the materials. I know you didn't just simply reread your role play. You really all prepared them. Congratulations. The Soviet Union. Okay. Let's talk about the Soviet Union and how it morphed and became the Russian Federation. I spoke yesterday in talking about Kennan, that George Kennan in 1947 articulated the craziness of Joseph Stalin. And wasn't it odd that this craziness is almost perfectly intact with Vladimir Putin? That you could say that although the Soviet Union doesn't exist, the Russian Federation, they've been through Yeltsin and a period of liberalization. And there they are again, exactly as they were in 1947, I think. I don't know. Does anybody, the Soviet Union was a key player as a nuclear power. And the Soviet Union at this time in the 50s was beginning to be very interested in the Middle East. They always, since the Empress Catherine, they were always looking for a warm water port. And the Soviet Union was, during the Middle Eastern conflicts, was always on the side of Syria, Egypt, to some extent, Lebanon, as a provocation, both to try to fill a void, a diplomatic and military void in the unstable Middle East, to try to inch its way in, partly to get that naval base that it has on the west coast of Syria, because Russia doesn't have a warm water port. During this whole conflict, they were friendly with Yasser Arafat. They were friendly with Nasser. I'm trying not to be too judgmental here, but it's hard to avoid thinking Soviet Union did everything it did, not for the benefit of the countries it was involved with, but only to extend its own influence. I don't think they gave a damn about Nasser or these demonic figures, the president of Syria. They were supporting these regimes because those regimes were hostile to the United States. Yasmin, do you have some thoughts about that? So thank you, Daria. You did very well. We know this was an inner conflict. Let's see. We had a hand up. No more hand up?
Yes, it
Yes.
was me.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
me.
yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Mine is just a comment, really. As I was preparing for this
Yeah.
simulation, I just missed this time when the UN worked. Like
Uh,
this is specifically was handled so well. It didn't escalate. It all countries stuck to their word, and the US was very adamant in ending the war. Everything moved very swiftly. I wish we could still handle conflicts like this till now, because I feel like this is how we would avoid all this war that is happening right now across the world.
yes.
I don't know. I was just very much impressed with how the UN and all the countries handled this
Um,
specific crisis, and I
you know,
just wished we did the same.
that's great. And this is why your comment is right on point. And I think it's one reason studying history does have some value. With American students that I work with, they're always saying, how do I prepare for the working world? And should I take political science or economics? Yes, but I always recommend to American students study history, and in fact, major in history. Yasmin has just reminded us the UN sort of used to work. People had expectations. I think nowadays, the last thing in the world you would think of as a solution to a problem would be the United Nations. Did they bring peace to the Eastern Congo? No. Um, are they maintaining a peace between Israel and Egypt in the Sinai? I guess so. I mean, their very presence inhibits, another war, at least in the Sinai. But that's a great point. Yes, I mean the UN had prestige, that had hope, maybe because it was new and it had not yet begun to fail. Dag Hammarskjöld very bravely went to the Congo to try to solve that problem and was killed in trying to find an outcome to the Congo crisis, what we now call DRC. And he failed. But but I think everybody in the world looked up to him as a person of integrity and ability, and we have noticed that Scandinavians tend to have more success. It was Norway that assisted in the creation of South Sudan, um, in the comprehensive peace agreement separating Sudan from South Sudan. Norway, I guess it's funny. The Scandinavian countries have very few enemies. Nobody, there aren't countries in the world that have reason to hate Norway. I think maybe Sweden, maybe Denmark, um, and because they're not directly involved in, they don't have equities in these conflicts. They have a pattern of being fair-minded, genuinely trying to get parties to negotiate. They're very good, by the way, at running negotiations. The Oslo Accords in 1992. Um, Maybe only Norwegians could do it. That was not the UN. It was they were Scandinavians. There was a personality at the United Nations, Ralph Bunche, an American of African descent. Everyone in the world loved Ralph Bunche. And when Israel went to war in the 1940s and 50s, um, Ralph Bunche used this expression. He said, I call on all parties. And he had a personal prestige, a personal persuasiveness. When Ralph Bunche gathered the Israelis and I think it was the Egyptians, maybe the Jordanians in Cyprus in the early 1950s. Number one, he managed to get them in a room. He did this. It had a lot to do with the power and prestige of a single personality. I'm not sure we have that now. We have the UN has turned into a bureaucracy. There are great people in the UN, but I don't think anybody of the stature of Dag Hammarskjöld, Ralph Bunche, who had been an American diplomat, but who gave that all up to become to put his service into the United Nations with great success. He didn't come up with a peace in the Middle East, but he did manage to get the warring parties in the room to talk, something we're not able to do anymore. That's a painful comment, Yasmin, and you're quite right. We 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 look to history for examples where the UN could be more effective. And wouldn't it be nice if we could regain that? As I've said a few times in this class, sovereignty is okay, but it's pretty primitive as a way of avoiding conflict. I have my sovereignty, you have your sovereignty. We're going to fight, we're going to hate each other, we're going to go to war, and the UN has no authority to stop us. Someday, no day soon, there will be an authority higher than national sovereignty, whatever you call it, world federalism. I don't know where this will come from, but I don't see how these terrible conflicts can be resolved without some higher authority. After World War II, the destruction was so complete of the entire world that the only thing left standing was, well, the United States, which was in the war but was not destroyed, like all the other combatants, France, England, Germany, Soviet Union, Italy, they were all destroyed. The US, through no cleverness of its own, but with the two oceans, came out an intact nation. And the only other thing going was the United Nations. I guess it was the destruction of everything else that raised the prestige. I'm going on and on. I very much wish that the UN could regain the authority and the prestige that it used to have. When I hear criticisms these days of the UN, my response sometimes is, it's all we have. We don't have an alternative. We have NATO and CETO and and the European Union, but we don't have an international body that is the equivalent of the UN. The UN does not have a good record in the past few decades of succeeding in development and conflict reduction, in negotiation. But it's all we have, and I guess we're going to have to stick with it until an alternative comes along. Anyway, again, as with the two other simulations, the participants today, wow, how do I put up my applause here thing? React, here we go. I recognize, okay, chime. I'm not good at this. I can recognize hand gestures, but I can't make them. Everybody here today was fantastic. And Sergei Topal, who's been observing from the sidelines, applauds you. This is great. This is great. Someday we'll all gather in a room and there'll be the greater illusion that we're actually doing this. It's a little bit hard to do it through Zoom, but congratulations, everybody involved. This is absolutely great. I have received a note from Michael Clark at King's College about Thursday. He does confirm. I think this is going to be very interesting. I will post his bio on the Google Classroom. I think I'll do it now. Michael Clark is one of the world experts on military negotiations. He's looking at, we sometimes call it the coalition of the willing, the Northern European countries that seem to be doing something outside of NATO in support of Ukraine. And I think there's genuine support there. I don't know if it'll be adequate to reduce the suffering in Ukraine. I know electricity, high-rise apartments being damaged. It's barbaric what's happening. And I think between the Baltics, the Nordic countries, Poland, Romania, there truly is a wish to gather something. It's not the United Nations, it's not NATO, but it's a different configuration of countries that have military equities. And I think they're working very hard in support of Ukraine. We don't know if they're doing enough. We don't know if they'll succeed, but it's worth paying attention to what they're doing. And Michael Clark on Thursday will give us a good view of that. Thank you, everybody. This has been amazing, amazing, all of you. And I note we've had 3 continents in this exercise, and isn't it remarkable how it all worked? Your own cultural backgrounds, which are very strong in every case, you managed to work this together as you would in a better United Nations. I think if we just gave these decisions over to you, we'd have a much better result. Amiri, Stefan, agreed. Wonderful session. Thank you, everybody. You surprise me every time. You're great. You're wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.